And we are back here in Brussels at Politico's AI and Tech Summit. Thank you all for being in the room. Thank you for joining online. And above all, thank you to my next guest, who's joining us online as well, Mr. Amandeep Singh Gill. Very welcome and very nice to have you with us, Mr. Singh Gill. So in our next session, we will be turning to global governance on artificial intelligence and technologies. And this is something where Mr. Singh Gill has been at the very forefront of. We've talked a lot about Europe. We've talked a lot about Europe's infrastructure, European investment, and how it deals with the transformation of artificial intelligence. What we haven't talked about as much is the global context. And very specifically, not only sort of the context or the relation of Europe with its closest partners, but really of the world as a whole. And that is where the United Nations, and specifically Mr. Singh Gill's office, comes in. Just a quick reminder that you can still ask your questions using slido.com, and a quick reminder to talk on social media, X, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, any of your choice, about this summit using the hashtag #PoliticoAITech. Mr. Singh Gill, it's wonderful to have you. If I may attempt to illustrate your background and your rich experience in global AI governance, you've been at the forefront of global AI governance for the past few years. As the Secretary General Special Envoy for Digital and Emerging Technologies, you have worked to implement an agenda set out by Secretary General Antonio Guterres to make sure that countries around the world find consensus on how to handle technology. For instance, how to handle risks around AI. My opening question is very simple. Considering you've been at it for a couple of years and considering the very geopolitical context that we find ourselves in today, how is that going?
Thank you, Laurens. Thank you for having me. That agenda is going very well. And this year, as we follow through the Global Digital Compact adopted last year in December 2024, we have clear pathways, clear milestones for action. If you look at negotiations on the setting up of an international scientific panel and a global dialogue on AI governance at the United Nations, those negotiations are advancing, and we hope to have these new first ever global mechanism for AI governance live. The Global Digital Compact also called for bridging AI divides. To just remind ourselves, all of Africa has less than 1,000 GPUs. And many American companies singly could have hundreds of thousands of GPUs. So we have an obligation to address this technological divide. And this summer, the Secretary General will deliver a report on innovative voluntary financing options for AI capacity building. So these are very, very important developments this year. So regardless of the challenges we face, and those challenges are real, I do not deny them, we are determined to make progress, and we are determined to live up to our responsibility at the UN to ensure that emerging technologies, and AI in particular, are developed and used in ways that is safe, inclusive, and beneficial for all.
And before, I seem to have lost audio in the room at least. But I will continue. There we go, we're back. Before we turn to sort of the more questions around global cooperation, I want to ask you about this report you mentioned on innovative funding. You mentioned it's coming up in the summer. Can you give us a bit of a peek of what is in this report? As in, like, what are the models that you consider sort of models that the world should look at when it comes to funding AI development in regions that perhaps don't have the same levels of investment that we're seeing in Europe right now and in the US and other regions?
Indeed. So before I come to the models, a quick word on the demand landscape and the supply landscape. So, in various regions of the world, there is demand for AI capacity, and that varies, whether it is policy and regulatory frameworks, or it is the direct enablers of AI, which means infrastructure, including training compute, which means data sets, talent, and accessible use cases so that you can quickly diffuse AI into applications. Now, when it comes to models, we've seen in many other areas of development, whether it's global health or food security, we have used platforms such as the Global Fund for tuberculosis, malaria, and HIV/AIDS, or Gavi, to catalyze certain outcomes in the development space. In the case of AI, we can learn from all these models, but we also have to innovate because this is not like malaria nets or ART therapies. So, what we are looking at is models where public and private resources can come together in innovative ways and can address these critical gaps and help build a minimum irreducible capacity to both develop and deploy AI around the world. So, one of those models, obviously, is the idea of a global fund on AI, which was advanced by the Secretary General's high level advisory body on AI. Uh, and there are other options that we are exploring that would be part of this analysis, this report, including a pooling of in kind contributions and also ways in which we could bring diverse funders. Because at the moment, we see uncoordinated responses, uncoordinated, well intentioned, but uncoordinated initiatives on global funding. So, how can we bring, even without infringing on any of the funding decisions that those funders would like to make? How can we bring these different initiatives together on a platform so that there is less fragmentation of the capacity building effort?
What's the response you've had on these types of initiatives from Europe? We are coming to you from Brussels, the heart of the European Union, and there is a question as to what extent Europe can focus on itself, but at the same time also focus on these global initiatives. What's the response you've gotten from Europe?
So for us, Europe is a critical partner, and it has been a very constructive partner in the Global Digital Compact in these decisions on AI governance. And Europe, by its own example today, is investing heavily in infrastructure, also talent development, facilitating the uptake of AI by startups and SMEs, and critically, looking at the connections between the rest of the economy and the burgeoning AI sector. So, how can you push AI into some of these other sectors? So, Europe is an example also on the regulatory side with GDPR and the EU AI Act. So, we really count on Europe to participate in this global effort to build AI capacity in the global south, particularly Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, so that these regions can not only benefit from the European experience, but can also help us build a more broad based AI economy, which is not centered on the concentrated digital economy either in the United States or in China.
I guess that leads me to an obvious follow-up question, which is not around Europe, but around the United States. There's been a lot of news and a lot of discussion around the new administration in Washington and its approach to the United Nations. And so my question is, from your perspective as tech envoy and leading these initiatives, what do you expect from the Trump administration exactly?
Well, the US is a critical partner for the United Nations. It's one of the permanent members of the Security Council, and it drove the international effort when the charter was negotiated. So administrations, come and go, But I think there is a need for multilateral cooperation, whether it's on issues like peace and security, which the Security Council addresses, or on upholding human rights and humanitarian principles, or in advancing sustainable development. And these efforts are not charity for anyone. These efforts build a better world for all of us. They benefit all of us. Perhaps, they might even benefit partners in the global north more than those in the global south. So I think these are fundamental factors which do not change with political changes. Of course, there is a new emphasis on certain areas, and I respect that. There is an expectation that multilateral organizations would perform more effectively and efficiently, would not be dispersed in terms of their focus. And again, I respect that very much as someone who, from the outside, has engaged with the UN system and has often found some deficiencies and gaps. So we are going to make an extra effort through the Secretary General's UNAT initiative to achieve more efficiency, more effectiveness in delivering value to member states. So our focus is not on, how processes go and how, meetings go, but it's actually on the outcomes. And I think on technology in particular, there is a benefit which is obvious, which is to ensure that these technologies are used to drive growth in the digital economy, create opportunities for trade and for investment for everyone, facilitate interoperability across borders, which again benefits the private sector, and also ensure that all these efforts are anchored in the UN Charter, in the international norms that we have built up over decades.
That seems like a clear message and vision to tell to those in power in Washington today. Let's see if the message also cuts across. As we turn our discussion to security around technology, I'd love to have your thoughts on another big topic on AI and emerging technologies, which is sort of the element of how AI technology is changing the defense and the weapons industry massively. And I know you have a rich experience in past decades in looking at nuclear proliferation and the questions around the world's response to nuclear technology. Over the past years already, going into sort of a decade, we've had a discussion at the UN level, a very hotly debated discussion on what you could call killer robots, essentially autonomous weapon systems. That discussion has changed in the last few years, in part because of new conflicts and of new warfare. And today we're seeing some of that autonomous weapon systems. We're seeing those being exported, sold, and used in Ukraine and used in conflict. So I want to ask you whether you've changed your perspective on this, whether you think the way forward on autonomous weapon systems today is different than we envisioned it, let's say, 7 years ago.
Yes, so I wouldn't say I have changed my perspective since I chaired the negotiation on lethal autonomous weapon systems in 2017-18, but there is a new reality that we have to contend with. I think the horse, in some ways, has bolted the barn. There are ongoing applications in the military domain. In some areas, they are around logistics, training. So they might have some beneficial effects, at least at the national security level, in terms of savings, efficiencies when budgets are under strain. But then in other areas, there are continued concerns. And the foremost concern is the ability to take life and death decisions autonomously. We should not cede human control, human responsibility, human accountability for life and death decisions. This is a premise on which international humanitarian law is based, so that you can hold people accountable in accordance with the principles under the laws of war. So that remains a fundamental concern. And in fact, as we move into the next wave of AI innovation, from agentic AI that does, restaurant bookings and returns an ill-fitting jacket or something like that, to systems that are connected to physical infrastructure, valves and pipes and so on. We have to be careful both on the military side and the civilian side that we don't lose this fundamental premise. The second area where I continue to have concerns, that is, these systems should not be mixed up with strategic systems. So there is, yes, I mean, we can debate it, but I think there is, in the nuclear deterrence domain, strategic systems have now become very complex. They stretch into, command and control, communication, surveillance systems. So we have to be careful in introducing AI autonomy into some of these systems. The last area where I continue to have concerns, and we must, prioritize this area, is that uh, putting some distance between humans and the taking of life on the battlefield, as we've seen in some current conflicts, uh, can have certain consequences over a period of time. Nations, armed groups can become more trigger happy. The threshold of conflict can be lowered. And sometimes when we combine this with, information campaigns that dehumanize the other side, you have a tendency to mount up the kills. So conflicts could end up being very, very costly in terms of human lives and not equate to compassion or some degree of restraint on the other side, which is taking those lives. So these are fundamental issues that we have to keep in mind as we contend with this new reality. And this reality, I mean, especially when I look at developments in Europe and the positions of some of the former participants in the lethal autonomous weapons system discussions, then these concerns are kind of heightened.
That's interesting because I think you're pointing out very concrete ways in which the discussion around AI enhanced lethal weapon systems is a novel challenge, is fundamentally changing the game. You've talked in the past about how the nuclear proliferation framework that was built up during the Cold War, to what extent that provides us lessons for today. My question is maybe, to what extent does it not provide lessons? To what extent does AI really challenge the UN to also go and review and revisit what exactly happened during periods like the Cold War? And to what extent are you coming up with new ways or new governance around lethal autonomous weapon systems?
I love the way that you put this question. So, in what ways is it not applicable? We often say, oh, let's have the International Atomic Energy Agency equivalent in AI. I think we have to be aware that in the nuclear domain, the highest prize always was arms control, disarmament, non-proliferation treaties, whether these were bilateral treaties between the US and the Soviet Union, or these were multilateral treaties, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or other the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. In the AI domain, I think we have to think differently. We have to think in terms of the articulation of soft and hard norms, soft law, which helps us not only come up with practical metrics and benchmarks for governance, but also promotes international cooperation. So it's a mix, and how much we can rely on or leverage existing laws like the international human rights treaties. The second area where we have to be mindful of the difference is the role of the private sector and the role of the independent tech community. There were no independent technologies except some nasty non-state actors, far and very few of them. So there are no in the AI domain. You have a vast tech community. You have a vast population of developers, and the private sector holds most of the cards in terms of the direction of the development of the technology. So, in our forums, in our discussions, and it's not just about the slogan of multi stakeholderism, we have to really find ways, trusted ways without conflict of interest to work together. with the private sector. And third kind of non-application area or lesson to be aware of is that this technology moves very fast. Nuclear arms technology moved in jumps, so, and there were always some years in between those jumps, from fission weapons to hydrogen bombs, from aircraft as delivery systems to ballistic missiles as delivery systems. There was some, we were never really prepared for some of those jumps because we were always playing catch up with technology. But in the case of AI, it's every 6 months, every few months something can shift the landscape. So that demands more agility and more of a kind of, let's say, anticipatory focus. And that's why you see the logic of the International Independent Scientific Panel and its twin sister, which is the Policy Dialogue on AI governance, so that our policy responses are better informed, are more agile, and not so much tied to, like, we have to have a goal of having a treaty by such and such date, etc.
Thank you very much. It's a pity because I feel we're getting into a really interesting conversation, but this is all the time we have, and I do have to pivot to the next panel. I want to thank you, Mr. Singh Gill, for joining us online, and it was a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much. For everyone in the room here, I'd like to ask you to remain seated because our next session will take place after a quick stage change. And in that session, my cybersecurity reporter, Antoinette Russi, will moderate a panel discussion on the cybersecurity regulatory wave. We'll have that with you in just a few moments. Thank you.